Hello, everyone. Is this working? Yes. Excellent. I am Donna from Australia. G'day. Big thank you to NDC for having me, and also thanks to all of you for trusting me with your precious hour. I hope there's not too many of you in food comas right now. Some pretty impressive food at this conference. I believe that all of us deserve to work somewhere where we feel valued and empowered. For me, this belief came from being brought up in a cult where I was deprived of freedom. I was then forced to get married at 18 and was a victim of domestic violence. Over the years, I've had 3 near-death experiences, which has really reinforced for me that life is short and we need to live every single day as if it counts. So if you're not happy with what you're doing, you should change it because it's not worth it. I've been in the IT industry for 20 years. Maybe over, but I'm getting old now. And I've been creating great workplace environments and building great teams. And today I want to share with you what I've learned over the years and hopefully give you some easy strategies so that all of us can create environments where our teams can succeed and be happy and empowered. I mostly work with senior developers and team leads, and the questions I get asked the most when I was reflecting on it are, how do I get interviewing right? How do I make sure I don't get the wrong people in my teams? Because we all know once you've got them in your teams, it's a lot harder to fix it. And the other question is, how do I handle those difficult conversations? If it's performance related or if the person's not fitting in with the team, how do I have those conversations? Because it can be tricky. So in this talk today, I'm going to run you through the life cycle of building, growing and nourishing a high-performing team and provide you with some tips and examples. My partner's Irish and he's got a bit of a running joke that us Australians all pronounce a whole bunch of words the same that everywhere else in the world pronounces differently or correctly. So I'm using one as my theme today, which is from higher to higher. And starting with build. So if you're in here today, you already work in some sort of team, whether that's 2 of you, 5 of you, 10 of you, or 100 of you. And in that team, you've already got an existing culture in place. So to build a solid foundation, the areas that we're going to look at are values, vision, and engagement strategy. And don't freak out when I say engagement strategy because it sounds all HR-y, gross, but it's not. I'm going to show you a really simple way that you can make sure you're looking after the engagement of your teams. Culture is made up of the values, beliefs, and behaviours that are shared and demonstrated across your team. Now, this can be organisational-wide or it can be team-wide. It depends on the company that you work for and how clear the values are in your company. Sometimes you may need to break down these values to make them meaningful for your team. And if your company doesn't have values, then collaboratively create values and beliefs with your team. It's a really important fundamental. Once you have these values, then you can recognise and reward individual and team behaviours that will help drive the culture that you're looking for. Why do you come to work every day? Why does your team come to work every day? What are they trying to achieve? What's your company trying to achieve? Can you answer those questions clearly? Because I've found that it can be one of the hardest things to really answer and articulate. A lot of companies have a high-level vision, which is sometimes not particularly meaningful for you at a team level. So as a leader or as a senior person in the team, it's our role to make that vision meaningful and to break it down so that it's relevant for your team. Once you've got that clear vision, then you break it down further with clear goals. What equals success for your team, for your company, and what equals success for the individuals in your team. That needs to be really clear. There's some great books that I recommend reading. Simon Sinek's How to Find Your Why. Some of you may have read that already, but it's got some practical tools in there of how to run a session with your team to find a team why, which is pretty cool, and also as an individual, how to find your own why. Dan Pink is another popular book, Drive, which has been mentioned in Ian Hughes and Mike Long's talks already this conference. But he talks about purpose and why purpose is so important. So, the dreaded engagement strategy. If you want a high-performing team, you need to plan how you're going to engage your team. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. We've all heard that one before. So I'm not talking anything complicated. I'm just talking a 1 to 2 page bullet points of how you're going to do this. And the key areas that you need to look at, apart from what we've already covered in values and vision, is collaboration and connection. It's human nature for us to want connection. So as a leader, we need to create opportunities for our teams to connect and collaborate and put a cadence in place. So the types of events and the types of collaboration and then when it's going to happen. And I will show you an example of that on the next slide. The next area is communication and transparency. Everybody wants and needs regular and transparent communication. So it's really important that we create different methods and different styles to suit the different people we've got in our team. So we need to understand who's in our team, how they like to communicate, because everyone is different, and then tailor our communication to suit. The bigger your company is, the more complicated this can get, even to the point of where do you go to receive information and give information. There's so many different platforms and methods. In some companies it's Slack, in some companies it's Yammer or it's Teams. The list goes on and on and on. So as a lead, making sure that your team is all on the same page about if I want to know this or if I want to say this, then this is the best way to do it. And then the third area is reward and recognition. How do you show your team that they're valued? One of the simple ways is using our words and saying, great job, thanks so much for that, that was awesome. But there's lots of other ways as well. So Yammer has a praise feature for anyone that uses Yammer. LinkedIn now has a kudos feature where you can give kudos to people. Not sure I'm sold on that, but I like the principle of it. There's a lot of recognition programs that you can actually have that specifically are a recognition wall where people can give and share recognition, which is kind of cool. A lot of companies have an awards program, whether it be a monthly, a quarterly, an annual awards. And then, of course, rewards. Everybody loves a good voucher every now and then, or even better, something a bit more personal and meaningful. Now, these don't have to be expensive, let me just clarify, because I know a lot of us, especially if we're in a senior lead role, we might not have a budget. So the first recognition program that I implemented, I had no money whatsoever for it. So it was a Living the Values award. So it was a monthly award. Peers could nominate each other for what value they'd been demonstrating with a little kind of sentence on what they'd done. And once a month, I would select 2 people and print out a fancy certificate and put it in a frame. It cost $5. But 12 months later with that company, I would walk past people's desks and they would have their frame on their desk still. So these little things seem a little silly and contrived, but if they're done with the right intentions, they're actually quite meaningful. So here's a really simple example of what I'm talking about around a collaboration and connection plan. For this particular team, we're going to have a weekly team meeting. We're going to have a team offsite every quarter. We're going to have a social club event where we go and do something really fun every second month. We're going to do end-of-month drinks every month. We're going to do a team lunch for anyone who's in the office or anyone who's in the area. I know in consulting this can be a little tricky. One-on-one catch-ups once a month. We're going to do a hackathon and we're going to do some group PD, professional development. So it's not your job as a leader to have to do all of these things, but it is your job to plan and to set a strategy so that it happens. Everybody wants to get involved and help. So all you need to do as a leader is empower other people to own some of these things, and they will drive it for you. But it's important that as a leader, we have a plan. Once again, really basic communication cadence. We're going to do a monthly newsletter, going to do a sales pipeline update in an email once a month. The biggest complaint I hear about from consultants is, what's coming up? What's coming up in the pipeline? What gigs have we got coming up? Nobody ever knows. So think about what your teams want to know and then tailor a communication plan to suit. Once again, you don't have to be the one that does it. You just have to make sure that it's happening. And I'm not saying handball to everybody else. You still should be doing some stuff yourself. So communication channel, this is what I was saying about where do people go for different information. It's really important, especially when you're onboarding a new team member, that they understand where to go for things, and that will help them fit into the team much quicker as well. So this is an example of a recognition program called Shout Out that we were using in my previous organisation. It was actually one that my team created because we wanted a way for people to give and share feedback in a visible place. And it went so well, we thought we would turn it into a product and let other companies use it as well. But something like this is really important, especially when there's so much research around cultures of gratitude and how that helps with mental health and stress levels. So I definitely recommend something where you're creating these cultures of gratitude in your organisation. You can also tie things like this into your rewards program as well, which just makes it even easier. So now you want to grow your team. And the last thing that you want to do is hire people who don't have the skills or don't fit into the culture. And I say fit into the culture, but I would like to change that language. Culture is always morphing and always changing. It's never going to be stagnant. So instead of looking for people who fit into our culture, let's look for people who add to our culture. So culture add instead of culture fit. Always look to keep improving and making your culture better. Now, as a team leader or senior team member, you'll have some influence over this process. So where to find and how to get great talent. Interviews, so the technical interviewing process, what testing you do, and then also when you're doing an interview yourself, what questions you're asking. Obviously, you've got influence over that. And then contributing to your employer brand to help attract talent. So going into these in a bit more detail, to build a great team, you need to hire the best people. Just a quick show of hands, because I know we've got people from lots of different countries. Does anybody find it really easy to find great technical talent? Who finds it easy? Oh, excellent. Not the only one in Australia. It's freaking hard, right? It's really hard. So help your recruiters. If you've got recruiters, then that's a great start. So if you've got recruiters, help them directly or indirectly. Get involved in meetups and community groups. Host, talk, attend. Give your recruiter a target list. If you've got people that you want them to target, give them the names. If you're not comfortable doing that, tell them where they should be going and what they should be doing. So the places, the groups, the conferences, case in point. But like LinkedIn have a lot of forums. Give them some help because they don't know what you know. You're all in the best position to be giving them that information. Encourage your company to sponsor. And once again, you may have limited control over this, but there's no harm in asking. Social media is fabulous. So promoting your people, promoting your team, promoting the company, promoting your projects, and asking your team to do the same. Engaging your team, we really need a couple of new people in our team. Let's all do a shout out on LinkedIn, or let's all do a Twitter post, or, Reddit. I don't know if you're allowed to do that stuff on Reddit, but yeah, engage your team. Where I've been most successful in building great teams, we've got our referral hiring percentage to 70%. 70% from referrals. And that is the way that you get a competitive advantage. If you can engage your network and you can bring people in via referrals, you're way ahead of everybody else because, I think it's something like 3% apply to adverts. It's crazy. Very, very low. So the other area is feeding into the technical requirements of job adverts. I don't know, just show of hands, as a senior person, do you get to input into what should be, in the big long bullet point list on an advert, on a job ad? Yep, there's a lot of nodding. Excellent. So say you're looking for a full stack developer, because everyone's a full stack developer, right? We all know that. Think in your head what skills you're looking for, and when you're doing that list of requirements that you're giving to your recruiter, or if you're unlucky enough to have to do it yourself, think about how many bullet points are on that list, just for a moment. Now, I haven't seen many job adverts that have less than about 8, and I've seen up to about 15. What I would say is that less is more. There's 2 downsides of putting a whole bunch of skills on your job advert. One is that every single bullet point you put on your advert is potentially creating an objection and stopping someone applying to your ad. And maybe that's what you want, but I doubt it considering how hard it is to find people. So every bullet point is an objection. And then the second point is every space you take up with your big long list is taking away space that you could be using to sell your company and why they should be coming and working for you. So my strong recommendation would be to keep your bullet point list to no more than 2 or 3. Really, really short. Great people can work anywhere, and you know all of this much better than me. You can work wherever you want. You know what you do. Do you need a job advert to tell you what you do? Seriously. So use your ads to sell people on why they should come and work for your company, why they should give up their precious time to go through your probably quite intensive interview process. Certainly, some places are more intensive than others, but sell them on why they should do that. And the final tip in that area is use a tool like Textio. So use a tool for gender neutral wording. There's heaps of free tools available. So just run it through, even if you're only contributing a piece into that advert, run a tool through it and just see what comes up and just check your language and make sure, once again, that you're not creating potential objections and stopping people from applying. So here's an example of how I like to structure ads. Hopefully you can read it. There's a bit of writing on here. So starting your ad about your company, right? Which most companies do. We've been around for 12 years, our founders, blah, blah. Nobody cares. What value do you add? Who do you help? How do you make a difference in the world? Tell them about your company, but tell them why it matters. Don't tell them the blah blahs, because they don't care about that. And then tell them what they'll be able to contribute to. How will they be able to make a difference and add value by coming and working for your company? Tell them about them and about the role and how awesome the role is. If you have to put your bullet points, which I say it's optional, you don't have to, this is where it goes, and keep it nice and short, 3 maximum, please. But sometimes you don't need to. You can roll that up when you're talking about the role. You know, if it's a full stack developer role, you put that in the role. It's a full stack developer role. What else do you need to add? If you've got one particular thing added in that little description, you don't always need bullet points. And then this is where you want your room to be. You know, what are all of the benefits and the great things about us and why you should come and work for us? Spend the time on your advert talking about your benefits. And then I know, you know, we all love AI and not having to actually read resumes or applications, but please put some sort of human connection there. Let people have the opportunity to reach out to someone if they want to have a conversation. Because once again, I don't know what it's like here, but in Australia, the IT market, you know, it's 1 degree of separation. Everyone knows someone that knows someone. So a lot of people aren't comfortable just going and applying to an advert because they're worried it's going to get out. And sometimes it does. So, you know, put an email address or a phone number. I know that seems really, you know, crazy, but give them an opportunity to reach out if they want to have a confidential discussion. It's really, really useful. So, you've got some decent candidates in your pipeline, fingers crossed. Who is 100% happy with their technical interview process currently? Anyone like very happy? Let's not say 100%, because what is anything over 100%? Who's very happy with their technical interview process? A few? Yeah, excellent. But a lot that aren't as well. I've done over 3,000 interviews in my time, and I've got a lot of feedback from candidates and also from hiring managers. And these are some of my top tips around what to do when you're creating an interview process. And some of these, once again, you may or may not have too much influence over, but you can try. So the first is streamlined. Try and keep your interview process to a maximum of 2 to 4, somewhere within that range, and always tell your candidates what the process is going to be at the beginning. So let them know up front, this is what it's going to be. Consistent. You want to be comparing apples and apples. You want to have the same, you know, Type 1 candidates all have the same test or the same questions. Type 2 candidates have the same test or the same questions, whether it's a .NET developer or a front-end developer, whatever. So try and you need to keep it consistent. You want it to be relevant for the role. So if it's a developer role, then you want it to be, obviously, coding questions or whatever is going to be relevant for that role. If it's going to be pre-sales, then you want to be assessing their pre-sales skills. If it's UX person, you need to be assessing their design skills. So keep it relevant. Objective is really, really important. So everybody that is doing interviews should undergo some sort of training on how to assess interviews. What equals pass, what equals fail, and what do you do if you're on the fence? Also, training around behavioural questions. You may, or you probably know what behavioural questions are, but they're where you're asking someone for a very specific example. So they have to give you the what, why, when, how of what happened in the situation. Behavioural questions are essential, but it does help to have some training on them. The other area is unconscious bias training. It's not whether we do or don't have unconscious bias, we all have it. So the more aware we are, the better. And then the last thing about being objective is think about the diversity of your interviewers. So a couple of months ago, I was sitting in a management final round interview and realised that for the technical interview, we'd put two males from the UK, two white males from the UK, interviewing another white male from the UK. So you want to set people up for success, and by putting people in environments like that where there's no diversity, it's just going to create more unconscious bias and not be an objective process. Demonstrable. So people should always demonstrate what their skills are. If it's developers, they need to code, whether it be an online test that they do, whether it be face-to-face coding in the interview, which I always recommend, whether it be you send them a problem that they solve or they have to create an app and bring it in and you then have a look at it. I've seen that work very well as well. You need to see them code. If it's UX or pre-sales, think about creating a scenario that you send through to the candidate before the interview, and then they can come in and actually facilitate or present on that particular scenario. You need to see whatever their skills are in the interview process. And then the final one is make it safe. If people are comfortable, they're going to perform at their best. And that's what we want, right? We want to see their best. We don't want to make them, stressed out and nervous and make a whole bunch of mistakes for no reason. It doesn't mean softening our process. It just means being kind. Make sure they've got some water. Think about the way the room is set up. Don't put, one person with three people opposite a big boardroom table. Just think about your best and worst interview experiences and then try and channel a better way. So you've checked off their technical skills, all good, very happy. And you need to ensure now that the values, beliefs, and the attitudes are in line with your team and organisation, and that they're going to be culture adding. And we all know that you hire a bad apple and it rots everything very quickly. So prevention is better than cure. So creating behavioural questions that are based on your values will really help this. So if your value is about learning, ask them to tell you when was the last time they learnt something new and how they did it. If your value is around teamwork, ask them to tell you a time when they last helped their teammates and what they did. Some of my favourite, I'd also ask a lot of follow-up questions. So the good thing about behavioural questions is it's nice and open-ended, and they'll give you something, and then you can really dig deep and really get into the nitty-gritty of what happened. Some of my favourite interview questions are, if it wasn't for money, what would you spend your time doing? Because it's a really good way to get to see someone's real passion and what they'd be doing if they didn't have to work. Another one is, tell me about a time where you improved something or brought some innovation into your team. That is certainly in the area that we work at is a really good question. Tell me about the best manager you've ever had and why. And I think that's important because it helps you realise how you would work with that person or manage that person if you were working with them. Stuff around stakeholders. So tell me about a time where you had a difficult stakeholder, how you handled them. Tell me about the most challenging project you've ever worked on. So everything in that frame of a behavioural question will really help you to get the full picture. And this is what we're looking for. We're not looking for a right or a wrong answer a lot of the time. We're looking for a picture. We're looking to collate all of these stories they tell us to get a picture of what their values are, what their belief system is, and how they will work in your team and whether they will fit in with your team or add to your team or not. Some red flags to look out for is if it was always someone else's fault. These are things you probably know already, but if it was always someone else's fault, that's a bit of a flag. If they've never made a mistake or failed, if they can't tell you about a time where they failed or made a mistake, it's definitely a red flag. it means that they're not willing to try. And certainly the cultures that I've worked in, it needs to be safe to fail. You need people to experiment. You want people to experiment. So if they're not prepared to fail, it's a bit scary. And then just be careful of leading questions as well. A lot of us do this. So we'll get in the interview and we'll be like, yeah, so our company is this, and our values are this and this. And then we'll say to them, oh, so tell us about your values. What's important to you? And you've literally just given them like everything that you want to hear, that they're just going to parrot back to you in a different way. So be really careful about leading questions. And if you are training your interviewers, then cover that in your training. So we talked about how hard it is to attract talent. An employer brand really helps and contributes to getting the best people and getting the best team. So once again, getting involved in meetups, community groups really helps, attending, hosting, sponsoring. Spruiking, I don't know if you use the word spruiking here, but like where you, I don't even know how to describe spruik. Where you're talking about your people, saying good stuff. So, talk about them on social media, celebrate their successes, because your team's successes is your success as a company. And nominate them for awards. There's so many really cool tech awards. So think about, is there people in your team that you could nominate to be recognised with one of these awards? It's something that we don't often think about because we're all wrapped up in our day-to-day role. But by recognising your team members for awards is going to benefit your company and benefit you as a leader. If you can get your company to go for a Best Place to Work award, that's really helpful as well, especially for overseas talent. Overseas talent, a lot of the time, don't know our brands. So if you're trying to attract people from all over the world, which in IT we generally are, these awards that talk about your company culture will really help you attract that talent. And then we talked before about benefits. So, make sure that you've got a careers page or a LinkedIn careers page that lists your company benefits and, has videos and pictures and stories that are of your teams and of your people and tell that story. I had a client recently and they gave their staff paid volunteering time, so a couple of days a year of paid volunteering time. And it wasn't on their advert, it wasn't on any of their websites. And I was like, how come this isn't on your adverts? And they're like, well, doesn't everybody do this? So some things that you might think are quite normal may not be. So really, it's really important to list all your benefits. Let's learn from each other just for 5 or 10 seconds. I'm really keen for everyone to just turn to the person next to them, or if there's 3 of you, do it together, but tell each other the best company benefit that you think your company has. So the best benefit that your company has. Just tell each other now. I'm counting, 10 seconds, go. I feel like I should just let that keep going because that sounded really fun. All right, now we're done. Was there anything, these two have some good ones. Was there anything that you were like, oh my God, really? That's awesome. I want that. Anyone? It's got to be at least someone. Yes? What was it?
6 weeks vacation.
6 weeks vacation. Yes, nice. I would like that. Anything else that people were like, yeah? Nothing? Everything was just standard and boring? Really?
Business conference.
Oh, yes, that's a good benefit. I feel like there is probably a few people that are getting that benefit as well. Cool, but you see, there's a lot of things that you may not think, that you think are standard, but they may not be standard. So one of the things that I would love to see in the future, and I think there's potentially a couple of companies doing this now, but I think it will head that direction, is a benefits buffet system. So everyone in your company is different. They want different things. They need different things. So why do we have this one size fits all? You just get these benefits. What if we had all of these different benefits and everything had a point system or a dollar system attached to it? And as an employee, you could pick and choose which one suited you. I think that would be really cool. Maybe my next business. So you've got a great culture. You're hiring great people. Now, how do you keep continuing to enhance that team and that culture? And so to build a great team, we've really got to nourish it. So the areas that we're going to talk about is empowerment, development, and leadership. So empowering your team is the fastest way to scale and succeed. In my previous role in Victoria, Melbourne, I had 80 direct reports. So 80 developers, consultants that were reporting to me. Like, that's ridiculous. Like, what can you do with 80 direct reports? Nothing on your own. So one of the first things that I did was work with some of my senior members and put together a leadership group. And that leadership group was made up of 10 to 12 people. And together we came up with a collaborative strategy of what we wanted to achieve for the year. And then each of those people as part of that leadership group were empowered to own and drive initiatives and bring in people from the wider team to run and drive initiatives. With that team, we were able to have 15% growth and a 95% retention rate. So empowering people makes your life a lot easier as a leader, but it's also what people want. And it's the easiest way to build a great team, in my experience. Before I was in Melbourne, I was in Western Australia in Perth, and I helped grow the team from 25 to 50 consultants in 6 months. And we had a 98% employee satisfaction result. So this stuff really, really works. Collaboratively setting goals with your team and individuals is probably one of the most important things. So working together to set high-level goals and then letting people figure out how they want to get there. Be transparent if there's any specific deadlines or boundaries or reporting requirements that they're going to need to deliver on. But other than that, let them work it out. You don't need to tell them how to deliver something or how to get to the goal, as long as they get to the goal. And make it safe for them to fail. Make sure they know what support is there if they need it. The great thing about letting people figure out how they get there is often you'll learn something, because not everyone's going to do it the way that you would have told them to. So by letting them do it their own way, you actually learn a lot more as a leader as well. The other big part of being a leader is ensuring that you've got the right mix of skills and roles to reach your goals as a team. So with your team goals, you need to balance people's strength areas. People love doing what they're good at. So if you can understand your team and understand where their strengths are and who's great at what, try and form your team around those strengths so that people are doing what they're really great at, and therefore they're going to love what they're doing. Think about the skills that are needed and the roles. So what hats are needed within the team? Do you need someone wearing a Scrum Master hat? Do you need someone wearing a stakeholder management hat, a technical mentor hat, a cheerleader hat? Do you need someone with commercial awareness, some delivery management skills? There's all these different hats that are needed within different teams and different projects. So as a leader, you need to think about those hats, and then when you're recruiting people into your team or shuffling people within teams, make sure that you've got all those roles covered and you've got people that love doing those roles in the team. And it will just make your life, once again, a lot easier. We talked about Dan Pink's book already. The other area that he talks about is autonomy, which is what this section's all about. The other book I love and recommend is Mark Manson, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F-U-C-K. And his book talks about the fact that our brains love solving problems. They just love solving problems. And if we solve all of the problems, our brain is going to make more problems. And we have less control over what problems they make. But what we do have control over is what problems we surround ourselves with and what problems that we choose to work on. So find the problems that you love, find the problems that your team loves, and then make sure there's lots and lots and lots of those great problems. People want to keep developing their career, developing themselves. To build a great team, you need to enable that. So I recommend to create an objective career pathway so that people know and can assess where they are now, where they want to get to, and it's objective of how they can get there. A really good framework that I like is the SFIA framework, the SFIA. And it's a specific IT framework that has a bunch of different levels and a bunch of different capabilities, and you can tailor and map where people move within those roles. I don't believe that it's our job as leaders to baby people or push people, but it's our job to set up a framework and then provide that support if that's what they want to do, because not everybody cares about career progression. So it's about enabling whoever does care to pursue it. The first capability framework that I created was on a spreadsheet, and it was super basic. I worked with one of the senior technical people, and it was just roles, and it was capabilities, and it was really, really basic. And it still did the trick. So it doesn't need to be super complicated. It doesn't need to cost you money. Redify, where I used to work, has a great open source career pathway called MAD Skills, so MAD skills with a Z on the end, random, but it's a great foundation for technical roles and capabilities. The other thing is around, once again, we talked about objectives, so transparent and objective pathways for promotions and also for salary reviews. And you may or may not have a lot of influence around salary reviews, it depends on your role. But wherever possible, people just want transparency. So they want to know when it's going to happen, they want to know how it's going to happen, they want to know what you assess, and they want to know why. They want to know the reasons. So I don't think there's any harm in being as transparent as you can, because people really value it. The most important thing for great people, in my experience, is learning, growing, and developing. People in tech always want to be just continuously improving. So enabling individual progress with whatever learning and development is of interest to them is really important. Some people might want formal professional development plans. Other people might want a more of an informal, quarterly, set some goals for the next quarter. It doesn't matter what you use, but you need to have a way to make sure that every single person in your team has a plan if they want a plan, and if they don't want a plan, that they're happy with the way they're progressing and the way that they're learning. Once again, at Redify, we used to do retros. So the same way when you finish a project, you would do a retro, we used to do retros on ourselves. So we'd ask for feedback from different people, we'd choose a retro partner, and we'd do a retro on our current role. And it was all just for the purpose of continuous improvement. It wasn't about judging or performance reviews. It was purely because we wanted to keep continually improving. And it was awesome. It worked really, really well. So you can tailor something yourself. I'm not a fan of old school performance reviews. I think they don't add any value. And that is the main criteria. Think about however you do it, it needs to be valuable for your team. Otherwise, stop. Sometimes you might need HR to sign off on that though, but do what you can to get around the process. As a leader, it's really important that we have good self-reflection. So we need to understand our own strengths and weaknesses, and we need to have a growth mindset. We need to always be open to learning, and we need to get really good at taking on feedback and asking for feedback. Everyone has heard the saying, people don't leave companies, they leave managers. So the feedback that I've received from the thousands of people that I've interviewed, 70% of the reason that they're leaving is managers. And the number one complaint that they have is managers don't listen, that they don't listen to them. When people come to us with an issue, there's two main ways that we respond. And Christina Alden touched on this yesterday in her EQ talk around our amygdala, I can't say that word. So the two main ways that we respond is, one, we try to solve their problem. Ooh, they gave me a problem. Ooh, I can solve it. So we try and solve their problem. Or number two, we give reasons for the problem. So we give them reasons for the issue or whatever's happened. Here's all the reasons. That comes across as defensive. So both of those options, not so good. People just want to be heard and acknowledged most of the time. So next time someone comes to you with a problem or a complaint, try just listening and acknowledging them. And it feels really, really weird, like this. It feels very weird. But then once you've listened, ask them some questions. Ask them if they've got any ideas of what they need or what they could do or how we could fix the problem. Ask them, because 95% of the time they're going to come up with an answer and they're going to tell you the answer. So a lot of the time they're not looking for you to come and solve their problem. They're just looking for an ear. They're looking for someone to bounce something off of, but give them the opportunity to work through it themselves rather than just give them the answer or give them the excuses. So that's an easy one, but there's no shortage of difficult conversations as a leader that you do have to have. And I prefer the term courageous conversations because it takes courage to be honest and transparent and to practice empathy. People respect, trust, and value you if you consistently do this. And I say practice empathy because it can be learned. I know firsthand, as a perfectionist with unrealistic expectations and a nightmare control freak, you can learn empathy if you practice. And we need it. To be a good leader, you must have empathy to build a great team. One of my favourite leadership coaches, Georgia Murch, has a saying, nip it in the bud, which means don't let things build up. Nip it in the bud before it builds up. If you hear someone do something or say something that goes against the values of the team or goes against the goals or is inappropriate, deal with it. Deal with it pretty much straight away. Sometimes it can't be immediately because if they're emotional, you want them to cool down a little bit first, but deal with it as soon as you can. I had an example late last year where I was sitting at my desk, we had open plan office, as you know, we all have nowadays. Don't even get me started on that. And I heard a senior developer and a junior developer having a conversation. They were working on a project together, and the senior developer was getting a bit annoyed, and I heard him say, just do it the way I'm telling you to do it. Like, kind of harsh. And I was like, okay. So then the junior developer went back to his desk. So I waited about 10 minutes, and I pinged the senior developer on Teams, which was our channel of choice. And I was like, hey, can we have a quick chat in the room? Went into the room, and I said, look, I heard the way that you just spoke to, let's call him Joe. You know, what's going on? Like, what's going on? Tell me what's going on with you. And straight away he started telling me how frustrated he was with this. If anybody was at Ian Hughes' talk earlier, how frustrated he was with the React app that he was trying to build. And you know, he just got frustrated and he just snapped. And I said to him, do you think that that was the best way to handle it? And he was like, no, nah, definitely not. And I was like, well, what do you think you should have done? And he said, oh, I should have waited until I wasn't annoyed. I should have just said, let's just take 5, and then I should have had a conversation. And I was like, okay, so like now what do you think should happen? And he was like, oh, I need to go and apologize and, you know, say that I shouldn't have spoken to him like that, blah, blah, blah. So basically solved his own problem just by me calling him on the behavior straight away and letting him have the ability to work through it and talk through it. He already knew what to do. But you need, as a leader, to not be afraid to have that conversation because you're helping him, you're helping that person by having that conversation. Otherwise, he probably wouldn't have because he just wouldn't have thought about it. He would have got back into his, you know, I'm working, smashing out my React app. This is more important than people. So as a leader, we have to be that person that pokes and prods and calls people on those behaviors. Yes?
Autonomy. What happened with the autonomy when you interact?
Yeah, so he's autonomous to he's autonomous to build his thing, but as a leader, I need to call out bad behavior. That's my job as a leader. If there's behavior that's not in line with our values and speaking to somebody in that tone and in that way, he wasn't giving his developer autonomy. So my job as a leader is to coach him on what autonomy is. But he solved it for himself. All I did was ask some questions. But I like it. Good pickup. So I just want you to think for a moment about a time where someone has given you some constructive feedback and where they've done it in a respectful way, not someone who's come and been an asshole, but someone who's given you constructive feedback in a respectful way. Did it make you respect them more or less? And did it make your relationship better or worse? Just kind of think on that for a moment. Because in my experience, we're often very afraid of giving feedback because we're worried that it's going to ruin our relationship with the person. That's generally the number one concern, is we're going to ruin our relationship. So we don't want to go and have that difficult conversation or courageous conversation. But in my experience, it's the opposite. When you go and you call someone on behavior or you give them some constructive feedback, they respect you and they appreciate you so much more for that. You know, that senior developer and I caught up for coffee last week. We don't work together anymore, but I'm one of his, you know, friends and trusted advisors, and he comes and asks me for help all the time because we have a really close respect and bond for each other. So what I would say is if you go into these conversations seeking to understand and listening and asking questions, it will make your relationship stronger. Brene Brown talks about, and I don't know if anyone's watched the Brene Brown Netflix show, but it's pretty awesome. If you haven't, I would definitely recommend watching it. She's amazing. But she talks about the story that I'm telling myself. And we all have a story that we're telling ourselves. So we need to be really careful because a lot of the time that story is not the actual truth. Georgia Murch, the other leadership coach, talks about truth in a similar way. She talks about that we have our own truth, the other person has their truth, and the actual truth is probably somewhere in the middle. So it's really important that we seek to understand as the first step in any of these conversations as a leader. The other statement that I love is people hear your content, but they smell your intent. So they hear your content, but they smell your intent. And I think that is gold because it's true. If you go into something with bad intentions or if you're not actually trying to help someone, they will smell it a mile off. It doesn't matter how you phrase it. They can smell whether you actually are trying to help them and you're being genuine or not. There's lots of different feedback models that you can use. This is what I've created because it works for me. It's probably a bit of a softer approach. And it's ours because it is all about us working together. So the first is tell your truth. So what's the behavior that you observed? Tell the person, this is a behavior that I'm concerned about, that I've observed. And then seek to understand what's their truth. Seek to understand what's their truth. This can take a while. Like I had one of these a couple of months back and it was about 30 minutes of understanding their truth. There was a lot of their truth. So really seek to understand and listen to what they're saying and to what their challenges are. And then recommend the behavior change that you're suggesting. So this depends on how big or important it is or bad it is. If it's something that has to be changed, we're not recommending you're going to set expectations. But a lot of the time I've found that you can use a softer approach and you can recommend a behavior change rather than trying to, you have to do this. I just don't think it works that well. Use consequences though. So when you're recommending a behavior change, consequences can be good or bad. So a good consequence is if you start doing this, the team is going to work much better together. We're going to have a much better outcome. So that's a positive consequence. A negative consequence might be if you don't change this behavior, the team is going to have a negative perception of you. Or if it's really serious, then you're pulling in cards like, if this behavior doesn't change, I'm not going to be able to support your promotion request. Because as a leader, this is what you need to demonstrate, and you're not demonstrating that. Other negative consequences, if it's next level, could be it's going to need to get escalated to HR if the behavior doesn't change. So tying in a consequence to the recommendation just depends on the level of how serious it is. And then the fourth one is support. Ask them if they need anything from you to help action this behavior change. Is there anything that you need from me? Is there anything I can do to help you? Is there any concerns that you've got around how to do this? So part of asking for this support also confirms that they actually understand as well, because making sure they've understood what you're asking for is important. I would say, sometimes you get toxic people, right? And that's a whole nother level. With a toxic person, you can still use a similar model, but you've got to be very specific about examples because toxic people there'll be an excuse for everything. It wasn't me, it was someone else, and that didn't happen, and that didn't happen. So if you've got someone really difficult like that, you've got to have very specific examples of what the behaviors are. And you've got to tie them into the values. And this is why values as a baseline or beliefs or principles, whatever you call them, is so important because you've got to tie the behavior that's inappropriate to the value that we've all agreed to as a company or as a team. And that's how you can performance manage somebody, by using that example and value. But you can't let people get away with behavior that goes against your values because you will lose respect from the rest of your team if you let those types of behaviors keep going. So it's really important to jump on it. So this is a bit of a snapshot of the building blocks that we covered today to build a great team from my experience. And we probably have about 8 minutes for some questions. So hit me with some hard ones around how come that wasn't very autonomous. Yes.
So you mentioned
Yes.
How do you do that? And how often?
So it's at Redify, it was very much up to people how often they did it because it was a people-led approach. So most people would do it probably 6 monthly. But some people who were really kind of pushing hard and really wanted to, hit some goals or learn some new things might do it quarterly. But we developed an internal system to allow us to do it on a system. But before the system was implemented, it just used to be old school on a whiteboard, with post-it notes, the same as what you'd do a retro for a project. If you want any more info about that, though, a couple of Redifarians sitting over here, Alex and Ian, raise your hand. I'm sure they would be more than happy to chat to you about it, all very passionate about learning and development. Yes.
Something you mentioned was the high importance of transparent and objective processes for promotion and salary reviews. I think that's probably a lot simpler at smaller companies than larger companies. And I'm curious, in your experience, if there's been a model that works really well for that. Like I know in my situation, I often have to engage a director and a VP to facilitate that,
Yep.
which is inherently going to be opaque to my employees.
Yeah. So the question was around transparent, objective salary and promotion processes being more difficult in bigger companies and smaller companies, and whether there's any ways to make it easier. Question, is the process a set once a year or twice a year, or is it ad hoc, per person, random process?
Theoretically, we promote when ready, but realistically, it's semi-annually calibration.
So ideally, I think the most important thing is having set times. One of the biggest mistakes that companies make is that it's ad hoc and people have to approach the managers. So nothing happens. No one's going to tap you on the shoulder. You as an employee have to go and ask for a salary review or ask for a promotion. And there's a huge amount of statistics to say that women are not very good at doing that, and introverted people don't like doing that either. So a lot of times those people will leave your organization for more money or for the promotion before they will come and have a conversation with you. So the most important thing is set some times where you actually do it, even if it's not your high level. So this is where you get around it in a big company. If your big company process is you as a manager have to drive it and go and approach them, you can still have a set cadence with your team. So you can say to your team, all right, team, every quarter or every 6 months in this month, I'm going to come and have a conversation with you about promotion or about salary. So trying to set a time to talk about it is the first most important thing. And then with transparency, depends on how much control you've got in your larger organization, but generally you can still give a lot of information to your team that isn't necessarily on your intranet. So I think as transparent as you can without getting yourself in trouble, there's no downside. Yes?
When is a good time to set team values so that the team is not too fresh but not last too long without values?
That's a good question. And is that because you're currently growing a new team, or?
Not really, because we had a new team built up. Some values were set up, but later all this team was changed, and now there is no one from the original team.
Yep.
So yes, that is the question. And I think if we set values immediately, people are too fresh, they don't know each other. It's maybe too early. So how to find this balance?
Yep, just in case anyone didn't hear, the question was, when's the best time to set values up within your team? At the very beginning, or should you wait longer? Personally, I think there's no downside in doing it at the very beginning. I would always say sooner rather than later, because your values, they're not something that change every week, right? They don't change every week. They don't really change every month. They probably don't even change every year, maybe every year. But the core foundational values will be the same. So I would say do it straight away. And then as people come into your team, you've already got that core values that you can talk to them about and onboard them to. Anyone over this side of the room? While I'm looking? No? Anyone over this side of the room? Yes. This one? Yes.
give some examples of how leaders has to help people solving difficult situations like related stress? Because I couldn't find in any of these 14.
Yeah, that's a great question because it's very prevalent. So the question was that big fan of the Amazon leadership principles, as am I. They're amazing. If you haven't Googled them, you should. I love them. But where does stress fit in as a leader? How do you help your team manage stress? Because the leadership principles don't really cover work-life balance, stress management, which you are correct. So one of the interesting things about a culture that is very much you're very empowered, lots of autonomy, very empowered. You can manage your own time, you can do whatever you want to do, which means you can work as hard as you want, which is actually dangerous for high performers. For people that are high performers, they can keep pushing until they burn out, which is a big problem in our industry. So as a leader, you need to check in on that. So one of the things that we do at Amazon is we have, I can't even remember the name of them. I'm only 4 weeks in, so I'm a total newbie. But we have these little, how you have like an employee survey? We have a question that pops up every day for us, a different question, and it pops up and says, how are you feeling about your work-life balance today? And you give a rating out of 5. Or it might say, do you feel that you understand your role and responsibilities? And you rate it out of 5. So just a different question every day. And that goes to the leader so they get a bit of a checkpoint on where people are at. And recently, one of the ones was around work-life balance. And the leaders had a look at it, and she's then said to everyone, look, the work-life balance feedback came back, this is where it was. I just want to remind everyone that you're in control of how much you work. And if you are having any issues with prioritizing, or if your workload is too much, I'm here to support you, and you need to come and talk to me. Because I don't see what you're doing every day. You're in control of your work. And that's the tricky thing to manage with very empowered environments. People can, to their own detriment, burn themselves out. So as a leader, I think all you can really do is make sure that you're talking to your team regularly about it. Lead by example. So if you're working 80 hours, I guarantee you your team thinks they're going to need to work 80 hours as well. So make sure that you demonstrate flexibility for yourself, that you demonstrate work-life balance, that if you're sending emails at 2 a.m., you tell people, well, I'm sending emails at 2 a.m., but tomorrow I'm not starting till 10, or whatever it may be. Leading by example really helps, but also just asking them, do you need support? How is your work-life balance? It's a really good question. I'm going to wrap up, though, because I don't want to go over. So it takes courage to be a leader, to step into all of this as opposed to away from it. And I do promise it gets easier with practice, because I was a really, really terrible leader 10 years ago. But it's a real privilege to be a leader and to be able to help people live their best lives. So thank you so much for spending your valuable hour with me. I've got a bunch of stickers down here if you want any. Connect up on LinkedIn. Come and have a chat with me after the conference. I'd love to meet you all. And yeah, thank you so much.